Welcome. So you have arrived at a place in your spiritual development and in your maturing discipleship that you have become ready for much more freedom and sovereignty across many shifting realities and changing seasons. Things change out there, and you are able to be present for it. So that means you're ready for the 7th mastery in the sovereign way, which you can buy on Amazon. The 7th mastery, which we shall call adventuring. Now imagine being so malleable in your mental and vibrational mastery, so grounded in your self-love and in your acceptance for the path that you're on, that you could just woof into any dimension that Christ calls you into, without resistance, without clinging to everything that you've worked for in this dimension, without protecting all the knowledge that you've gained or all the interests that you've earned and the reputation and the lifestyle, just free to go. Just free to say yes to God. Free for the poise and the radiance of love, when all the tectonic plates of reality shift all around you and everything changes, but you do not, because you trust life. Imagine when God says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it?" That you are the one who says, "Yes, Lord, I see it. I do trust you. I do trust the way and the wellspring." Imagine. Do you know what it takes to have that kind of faith? That kind of dependability to walk the sovereign way, the surrendered way, following only the call of the one who loves you the most, whether it leads you through abundant fields and meadows or whether it leads you through the desert. Do you know what it takes to say yes? I know that you do, because you are an adventurer. And I'll prove it to you. Let's see what it took you to get here, to this level of the game, the 7th mastery in the Sovereign Way book. First, you remembered the truth that transcends all time and space, that you come from the heart of God, that you are made of light, originally good and always becoming. You remembered that you are known, never forgotten, never alone, always worthy and always provided for. And even though you pretend that that isn't true sometimes, and you live as if it's all going to fall apart and fall to pieces, in your heart, you know who you are, don't you? I can see if you're nodding along. And then the 2nd mastery, since you nailed that one, you nailed remembering, you've got it locked in, it's in your bones. The 2nd mastery, since you've remembered this, you've started recognizing the difference between that truth and all the other stories and lies. You're recognizing the difference between the self and the personality, the essence of who you are and the structure of what's around you, the home and the house. And that brought you to the 3rd mastery, because since you can remember the truth of who you are and recognize the structures of what you're not, you've started getting very good at releasing those stories and those lies, those falsehoods, the structured paradigms and all the errors and trauma. And you've become very good at forgiving others and yourself, because love does that. You've let go of a lot of stuff, and you're letting even more evaporate away by the grace of God. And that's made you available for the 4th mastery, hasn't it? Because if you're effectively letting go and releasing the patterns and systems that belong to outdated versions of who you are, then the natural organic expansion of life force simply increases your capacity in a new way, to meet the challenges of life in a new way. And in fact, you become available for life force to overflow and connect you with whole dimensions of possibilities, all because you're available for expansion. Which is what brings you to the fifth mastery, genius, because you started becoming very sovereign in your thinking, because you're not attached to the narratives or so quick to be seduced by some mainstream idea. You've been honing your higher faculties and really conditioning your marvelous mind for processing new, faster, smoother, more complex realities. New creativity is bubbling, and you are present to it. How have you been doing that? In the Oasis, some of our members said they've been speaking about new art forms or artworks coming out, beautiful works of art we've seen shared in the Oasis, new family relationships forming, beautiful writings, blogs and books, business ideas, revelations and community connections. You're present to a new realm of creativity that you've never experienced before. And you are able to understand, synthesize, and formulate these new realities to help others receive what you now know, because you're a genius. And that brought you to the sixth mastery, which is alchemy. Because since you now operate from these higher dimensions, from these higher faculties, you're able to hold your mind and energy steady in all sorts of different attractor fields and all kinds of weather. Difficult things happen and you don't fall apart because you're holding a stable love for what is, and because all things transform around you in response to that love. Good things happen and good things grow because you were there to water the soil. That's the alchemist. With Jesus's authority to turn water into wine, you are suddenly free to serve anywhere because there is no lack, because you are able to form mana out of the possibility of it even being there, because God knows you are able to love. And that's what brings you then to the seventh mastery, adventuring. And it makes perfectly logical sense, because with this level of spiritual authority that you now embody, the ability to move into any energy field and be the presence of something holy, it means that your next mission then is to deepen your trust in the flow of life that promises, I am making a way in the wilderness and a wellspring in the desert. And that's why the seventh mastery in the sovereign way is adventuring, true adventuring, not just learning to go on a trip from time to time, not just having to have a strange and unusual experience from time to time, but learning how to truly realign into God's flow state as it takes you across all different kinds of realities, including sometimes those that you swore you would never enter. Let's do a test. Let's say that you've planned a quiet evening writing your book, or painting on your canvas, or putting up that shelf that you were looking forward to, and you visualized it. You've arranged your workspace, you've lit the candle, you've poured the tea, you've put on the right kind of music, and just as you're about to settle in and really let the artistic juices flow, God tells you by way of demonstration that you need to go and plunge the toilet, you need to replace the U-bend, and you need to clean up a horrible mess instead. And you know exactly what you need to do, and it's not what you planned, but you will do it. Now the question is, will you jeter like a graceful ballerina into your new reality, or will you stomp like a petulant child with your lip sticking out? Let's say that you must suddenly leave the clean and free lifestyle that you've been creating in the high mountains, and you must move to a moldy bedroom in a brick house in a damp inner city on the other side of the world. Guess how I know about that one? Or perhaps you must discontinue a timeline of being an impoverished artist and activate a season of great influence and overflow. But there's a whole community together sharing the story of the impoverished artist identity, and it would seem like such a betrayal. Or perhaps you have to stop integrating crystal grids at key dimensional portals across the globe and instead go start serving at soup kitchens instead. Or maybe after a long season of hard work, maybe a long season of hard and thankless work for some invisible goal that you can't even formulate and couldn't even put your finger on other than for a knowing that you did what you could. And maybe it's now time for you to rest for a year in the valleys, being nourished by the elements and tending to the life force of your body and your closest ones. You have the sovereign command of both your mental and vibrational worlds, so you can cheerfully change directions and experience no dip in your life force, no dip in your sense of worthiness or sense of belonging, no dip in the provision that comes to you in marvelous and miraculous ways. Listen, a spiritually immature person interprets external circumstances and says, oh no, things are falling apart. How unfair. It's all because of all of them out there. A spiritually emerging person interprets external circumstances and says, oh no, things are falling apart, and I bear some responsibility and accountability to transform my lack consciousness or my unhealed wounds or my traumas and pattern behaviors, and if I do that, then I can make things better. A sovereign person interprets external circumstances and says, things change. I know who I am. I am here. I know the way, and I know how I serve. I once had a client called Orly. She was a TV chef, and she was completely blind. And I was helping her to develop a book during this time that she was preparing to climb Kilimanjaro. And to begin with, I was like, what? But you can't see anything. But then I got to know her and I was like, oh yeah, she can do anything. But she gave me this spiritual lesson that I'll never forget. You see, she had been a gymnast when she was younger, and she could do a forward flip on a beam. Now, adventuring feels a little bit like doing a forward flip on a beam when you're blind. And even though it's terrifying, it's actually really easy. This is what Orly told me about how you do a forward flip on a beam when you're blind. Step 1, you start by knowing the position of your body in space and time. I know who I am. I know where I am. I am here. Step 2, you feel the beam under your feet. You feel it. You know it. You know the laws of the beam. You know its width. You know its length. You know its rigidity. And not like you know facts, but like you know the characteristics of your dependable Father in heaven. And you trust these 100%. The beam is dependable. It will never change. The beam has always been dependable so far, right? Let me see. Do you trust God? Has he been there for you? Yeah, you know it's true. And so then when you know where you are, and you know the laws of the beam, then you form an intention. You use your genius mind to move through the multi-dimensional vision unfolding in your imagination, knowing it, knowing I am doing a forward flip. And the brain calculates the precision required. You don't interfere with the mathematics as it sends trillions of signals to all the tiniest muscles in the most precise parts of your body. You decide, and movement simply occurs. If you trust the laws of the beam, and you trust your own divinely designed body's ability to follow him, then you just do a forward flip on the beam. And to her, it was no different than making a cup of tea. You don't know how to make a cup of tea. You don't. Sarah, you don't know how to make a cup of tea. Christy doesn't. She has no idea how to make a cup of tea. No, you don't know how to emit the right electrical signals to contract the correct fine motor muscles to lift the box of ginger and turmeric. You have no idea how to do that. You just know where all the things are in relation to each other. And then you just make some tea. And you trust that the workings of the mechanism will play itself out in perfect alignment with your intention, and tea will be served. The beam is there. It is safe for you to move forward. And I know that that's terrifying, right? We know what it's like when everything that you worked for and believed in and built up begins to shift and change. And grief is an awful but wonderful friend as we mourn the passing of dreams that once seemed so real. And in hindsight, you can also see that even in the dusty rubble, those immutable, unshakable truths were also always there. God was with you, and you chose life, and now here you are. Hindsight helps us trust the beam. And that trust is sovereign when seasons change. Because sometimes the brown leaves are not wilting because of your neglect trauma or their pesticide crop dusting. They're wilting because seasons change. Or maybe your business idea didn't fail because of your lack consciousness or their repressive tariff policies. Maybe it curled up and folded in because seasons change. The spirit is always moving. The adamantine particles of substance are always shifting like sand particles across the undulating dunes of manifestation. Relationships, business ideas, political parties, astrological forecasts, technological disasters, all these sand dunes made of moving particles held briefly in space by energy. Things change. And your soul is still whole. And if you are someone who is prepared to let all those shifting sand dunes become whatever they may, and you follow the only dependable way in the desert, then you are not just a light worker, but a light leader, because others will see your courage and your peace and the marvelous ways that you always seem to get out of a bind and how you always seem to flourish. And they will see the grace of God through you, and then they will find their way too. What is the only dependable way, truth, and life in the desert? Your heart knows. Follow Jesus. Oh, look out there. Everything's changing. What's going to happen? The sand dunes might form in new kinds of ways, and we don't know what it could be. It could be terrible. We just don't know. How can we be prepared for something that we don't know what is? The adventurer is prepared for what nobody is prepared for. The adventurer knows exactly what will be occurring. Love will be here. Creativity will be here. Energy and element will be here and now. And all those things work together for those who love the Lord. I will be safe and provided for. I will be able to serve. The beam is dependable. Let's finish up this little segment by reviewing what we've learned about how to do a front flip on the balance beam if you're a blind TV chef, courtesy of my client Orly. Step 1, you know yourself and your position. Check. Step 2, you know the beam under your feet. Check. Step 3, you move. Step 4, the laws of reality, the grace of God shifts you into place. Ask Christy, who is a digital nomad flowing across South America. Ask her if precision and excellence are a part of her trust in the dependable beam. And of course, there is much more to embody when it comes to truly mastering the outrageous surrender of flow state. And you can read much more about it in chapter 7 in The Sovereign Way. But for now, trusting that there is a dependable beam, knowing that it has always been there for you before, and honoring the specifics of that beam with excellence and precision, that will be the key to deepening your trust in this season as an adventurer. With that, I'm going to hand over to Christy to take us even deeper into this understanding. Go ahead, Christy.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's exciting to think about, and also requires our faith and courage. So I've called this Bible teaching that I'm going to give you now is Adventuring Faith Beyond the Reasonable Through Trust and Courage. And the key question here is, how quickly are you prepared? How well and how quickly are you prepared to step into trust and courage, to sidestep current reality in the face of danger, in the face of disaster, in the face of death, in the face of mundane, everyday circumstances? When God calls you to take on the new thing that is now occurring. So I want to share with you some stories, some like Sunday school Bible stories of characters who show us what it looks like to lose control, trust completely, and move with God into the impossible or even terrible situations that then result in redemption and reconciliation. What guided and sustained these people? Their foundation of spiritual mastery opened them to the divine genius of prophetic dreams and visions that anchored their faith beyond mental assent, allowing them to see and know. When you're willing to master adventuring, you can be the catalyst and not the victim. You can engage in the turning points in human history. In Romans 8:37, Paul said, we are more than conquerors through Jesus Christ who loves us. More than conquerors because we win through engagement, not conquest. So the first character I'm going to talk about is Joseph. Joseph is the son of Jacob. He had 12 sons, and he was one of the youngest. He was second youngest. And as a teenager, Joseph had the audacity to share the prophetic dreams that he dreamed. And the first dream was his brothers' sheaves of wheat came into a circle and bowed down to his sheaf of wheat that was standing in the center of the circle. And the second dream was that the sun and the moon and the stars bowed down to him. And he had the audacity to believe these dreams and share them with his brothers with great excitement, which endeared them to him. Just kidding. It didn't. When Joseph experienced his brothers' jealousy, they threw him into a pit. One of them wanted to kill him, and another intervened and said, well, let's not kill him. Let's sell him as a slave. So he's sold into slavery and taken by force to a foreign country. The spoiled second youngest son of a very wealthy man is suddenly stripped of everything he knows. What is his response? He serves his new master faithfully, even though he was betrayed by the man's wife, falsely accused, thrown into prison, and forgotten. Nothing could shake his faith because he knew who he was and what his destiny was. First rule of the balance beam, right? He knew this beyond the visible circumstances. He trusted that God was with him in spite of the terrible things that he was experiencing, and he held on to his faith and continued to prepare himself. He had these multiple reality shifts. He went from favored son to a slave. He went from a trusted servant into a falsely accused prisoner with no hope of release. He even rose within the prison and became the trusted advisor to the chief over the prison. He was invited before Pharaoh. And because he interpreted dreams for others while he was in prison, he was kind, he was open, he was faithful to others, and was demonstrated love and tapped into his spiritual genius to interpret dreams for others. And that was told to Pharaoh, and he suddenly found himself standing before the king. This led to him becoming second in command of Egypt, like a prime minister. Every shift that he went through required his complete surrender of the previous reality. His faith had to be more real than anything he was experiencing. So here's some of the things that Joseph demonstrated. So again, he surrendered control. He couldn't predict, he couldn't manipulate his way out of these situations. His success strategy was only to hold his trust and continue to be an excellent person. Number two, his faith went beyond his own mental assent. This wasn't just positive thinking. This wasn't dismissing the difficulty. This wasn't just believing in the invisible. Joseph was open to direct revelation, and within a family of a foundation of family devotion, he learned faith, he learned trust, and he learned courage. And those things served him well through 13 years of apparent defeat. Number three, he was immediately obedient. When the king finally called on him and he was pulled out of prison, his heart was already prepared to step up immediately. He did not hold back. He did not shrink back. He recognized that this was the moment his dreams had been preparing him for. At number four, he demonstrated graceful flexibility instead of bitterness. He demonstrated excellence and faithfulness in every situation he was placed in every role he was put in, every responsibility given to him. He trusted that the reality was temporary and that it was purposeful and leading him to destiny. And number five, he was living present to Christ. He said to his brothers many years later, "You meant this, throwing me in a pit, selling me as a slave. You meant this for evil, but God meant it for good." Joseph recognized God's design threading through every impossible circumstance, and holding on to his dreams allowed him to see the invisible architecture of the plan of God. The result was he became available to love everywhere he went. He saved the nation of Egypt and the surrounding nations, and his own family was saved from famine because of this demonstration. The impossible became real. He moved in synchrony with God's greater world plan, and his prophetic knowing gave him unshakable confidence as an adventurer. The second story I'm going to tell you is about Daniel. Daniel adventured across empires. Daniel had a similar experience. His country was conquered by a foreign power, and they took everything. Daniel's family was probably killed, and he and his friends were taken to a foreign nation and forced to serve in the court of the king. So war, defeat, forced relocation, emasculation. They were turned into eunuchs. Slavery to a pagan king surrounded by hateful sorcerers, witches, and wizards. And I mean the real ones, not the so-called ones, the ones who don't care anything for human life or sovereignty of other individuals. Everything that defined his identity was stripped away entirely, except for his faith and devotion. And yet Daniel rose to become the highest, most trusted advisor to multiple kings across different empires. Why? Because he knew, because he had prophetic revelation of the sovereignty of God over all kingdoms. It was an unshakable knowing of revealed reality. And like Joseph, Daniel knew something beyond the circumstances that were in front of him. So some key moments for him: he chose consecration to devotion over comfort. He refused the king's food and instead acted on his own conviction to say, no, I'm going to eat these things that my devotion, my consecration requires me to eat. And it was granted to him. He stood against cultural pressure to honor his conscience. He had unshakable faith when the king called on everyone in the court to interpret his dream, and not only that, to tell him his dream, and then interpret it. He stepped up with absolute confidence, not because he was so smart, but because he had honed his spiritual mastery of the prophetic. Daniel demonstrated courage in the lion's den and in the fiery furnace. And he said each time, my God will deliver me, but even if he doesn't, I'm still choosing this path. This is faith beyond mental assent. This is knowing. Number 3 is Rahab. Rahab is a woman who lived in Canaan. She lived in the city of Jericho. And one day, spies showed up from the tribe that she had been hearing about, this wild tribe out in the desert that no one could conquer, and that were marching towards Canaan. And there they were on her doorstep. Rahab had heard the stories of their God, and something in her shifted from hearing about to a certain knowing. And she said, I know that your God has given you this land. So she made an outrageous decision, and she hid the spies in spite of the risk. Her knowing went beyond logic. She knew that the invisible reality of what was actually occurring was so much more clear to her than what was happening, which was, I live in an impenetrable city. Our walls cannot fall. So she demonstrated faith beyond reason, and she betrayed her city based on something she knew in her spirit that was even more powerful than the loyalty to her own nation. She demonstrated immediate obedience. She had no time to carefully weigh these options. She had to act on her spiritual sight in that instant. And she demonstrated graceful flexibility. She was able to step into the impossible because she recognized that God was moving. And the result, her entire family was saved and became part of the lineage of Jesus. In closing, I would challenge you to remember that faith works by love. It is not passive. It is an unreasonable demand. All 3 of these stories show us faith beyond mental assent, and they show us certain trust in the invisible plan of God. And when I say invisible, I mean inexplicable circumstances that seem to be going the opposite direction of your destiny. All 3 stories show us people who lost control of their circumstances. There's nothing that says loss of control more than being thrown in a pit and sold as a slave, or having a foreign power come and conquer your nation and take you away. They demonstrated old success strategies don't always work. but your prophetic sight will sustain you. Your trust and your faith and your courage will bring you through the reality shift, and you will be the catalyst. You can up-level your divine relationship with God by recognizing him as Lord, trusting him completely, and moving in synchrony. This is the character of a leader of nations, and that in all three cases, nations were at stake. And in all three cases, they expanded through genius, through alchemy, and into adventure, which resulted in devotion. Faith does not just give you passive inner peace, it demands your unreasonable, courageous action, even in the face of danger or disaster. Now, the Bible is full of examples of this kind of adventuring. So here's just a couple more. Have you heard the story of Ruth, the Moabite widow who was left with nothing? She went on an adventure, and her mother-in-law, she went on an adventure with her mother-in-law back to the foreign land that her mother-in-law came from. She left everything and said, no, I'm going with you. Your land is my land, and your God is my God. She found herself working on the edges of a very rich man's field. And here she is, the poorest of the poor, and she takes an audacious risk. She sneaks into his chambers at night so that he discovers her laying at his feet. She was throwing herself at his feet and asking to become his wife. One wrong move and she's ruined, but the result is he accepts her proposal, and she ends up becoming the great-grandmother of King David, who is in the lineage of Christ. And speaking of David, here he was, the most unlikely of youth, the youngest son of all these warriors. And the prophet shows up looking for the next king, and they don't even think of calling him. And the prophet says, hey, it's none of these boys. It's none of these young men. Where is the missing one? Oh, he's out in the field watching the sheep. Bring him to me. And he's anointed as king. What happens next? The king is jealous of him and is hunting him down, and he ends up exiled in the wilderness. His only friends are the outcasts and the distressed. But his anointing was more real to him than the cave that he slept in. And he moved from a shepherd to a giant slayer to a fugitive to a king, entirely in synchrony with God's timing. Because faith works by love, and David took action, and he also restrained himself when he was given the opportunity to kill Saul, his enemy. He restrained himself out of honor and reverence to God. And lastly, I'll tell you about the widow with the oil. This was a single mother in desperate poverty. Creditors were coming to take her children away and traffic them to repay her debt. And she turns to the prophet of the land and says, what shall I do? And he says something absurd. What do you have? She said, well, I just have this little bit of oil left. That's all I have. And he says, go get as many jars as you can from your neighbors and start pouring the oil into the jars. And the oil did not run out until the very last container was filled. See, faith works by love. So here's the pattern. Real faith trusts, moves with certain courage, risks it all, and it can look and feel unreasonable. Faith works by love, and love demands action. The sovereign way teaches us that an adventurer is prepared for what nobody is prepared for. This preparation does not come only by watching videos or reading books or attending conferences. Those can be good things to fill your spirit and fill your mind. Study and teaching and training are good, but the preparation, the real preparation, is surrender. Surrender to love so deeply that you're willing to risk everything when God says move. Surrender so deeply that you're willing to open up to see the spiritual reality that's actually occurring, that makes the visible world negotiable. The question is not, do you believe in God, or even have you seen something supernatural in your spirit? Did you get a prophetic impression, a dream, a vision? But the real question is, will you act on what you've seen? Will you move when it's unreasonable? Will you choose courage when others would freeze? And will you step into the impossible because love compels you? So adventuring requires outrageous courage, activated by love and rooted in trust. The adventure is calling. If not now, when? So I'll, in conclusion, leave you with this. I'm encouraging you to study what I'm calling an axiom of truth that was given to us to activate our mastery of adventure. It was given to us 6 times in the recorded words of Jesus, which I'll paraphrase: whosoever seeks to save his own life shall lose it, and whosoever is willing to lose his life for my sake will preserve it forever. And the 7th time is recorded in the revelation of Jesus Christ, given to John the Beloved through a prophetic vision. And it says, and they, that is the believers, overcame him, that is the accuser, by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and that they did not love their lives even unto death. They were willing to put it all on the line. Adventuring is not passive mysticism. It is prophetic sight combined with courageous love that results in unreasonable obedience, demonstrating faith in the face of anything. And with that, Elizabeth, I give it back to you.
Thank you, Christy. Christy, you said, if not now, then when? And so, as Jesus showed us in the last teaching, when his beautiful mother said, they are out of wine, and he said, it is not my time, he moved in anyway. He trusted the dependable laws of the beam. He trusted the ways of life. He trusted the invitation from life, and he moved in and he performed an outrageous miracle. So Christy's shown us what it looks like to lose control, to trust God completely and to move into those new realities that lead us into total restoration and ripple effects that last generations. And I bet that you recognized yourself in Joseph and Daniel and Rahab and Ruth and David, the leaders of nations, the ancestors of Christ. And I think that you recognized the outrageous faith beyond mental assent, the outrageous obedience in a divine moment, the surrendered life of saying yes to God in the wildest storms of the desert, and the embodied trust beyond what is reasonable. This is knowing. So I'd like to ask you now, Christy gave us the activation. And earlier I suggested that if you can let those undulating sand dunes shift and be as they may, and Christy asked through the words of Jesus, are you prepared to lay down your life and instead say yes to the eternal? And I'd like to ask you if that's you. Is that you today? Are you saying yes to that mastery of adventuring, to that outrageous faith? If so, I'd love to see you put your hand up or put your hand on your heart and just feel that inner yes. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that yes, that right now is sinking into your bones and reinforming your cellular structure, and once again becoming a part of how you know yourself and your life. Liberating you, in fact, from the collective structure of the world. It is neither the source of your life nor a matrix that you must escape. It is the great adventure of your divine becoming, now that you embody that faith. It is the place where you meet the beloved, and life is now a friend that you dearly want to nourish. Your experience now is always expansive, and it's always safe. And there's nowhere that you can be out of place, like Joseph in the dungeon, perfectly held, ultimately belonging, and with a devoted family to help carry the yoke wherever you find yourself. There are always others around. You will be in love while washing the feet of your brother in the slums of despair. You will be in love while you're serving the queens of the highest galactic courts. You'll be in love as you go from mama bear warrior in one acute hurricane moment to the bliss of noticing a drifting scent of fresh seaweed in the next moment, and back again. You have total sovereign freedom to serve love at any time. And the old world will look at you and wonder, what kind of a creature could you possibly be as you move through cultures and vocations, methods and dimensions and callings with an ease that defies reason. And they will be amazed, because nothing but supernatural freedom can cause a queen to happily abdicate her throne or a warlord to humbly cease fire. And yet you liberate all manner of energy fields as you come into contact with them, and they will see that the grace of God is sovereign. Thank you very much for watching. Next week in the Oasis, we're going to come together as a group and we're going to really chew over what we've discovered in adventuring. But now, as I turn off this recording, we're going to go to a round table and just a very quick popcorn round, one line or less about what you received today from the Holy Spirit. Let's go.